Welcome back, and thank you for joining us for part 2 of this Coffee with Polio Experts interview with Dr. Ananda Bandyopadhyay, Deputy Director of the Polio Technology Research and Analytics at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. My name is Feiruz Kourji, and we'll be picking up where we left off our discussion of novel oral polio vaccine type 2, NOPV2, to go a bit further into the vaccine's field use for outbreak response and to see how it's performing to date. If you haven't yet seen part 1 of our interview, we encourage you to check that out. Also, if you'd like to learn more about polio eradication, please visit the GPI website at polioeradication.org. Hi, Ananda, and welcome back.
Hey, Feroz, good to be back.
Thank you. In the last episode, we chatted about the need for NOPV2 and how it differs from the Sabin oral polio vaccine type 2 and the development of the vaccine over the last 11 plus years and its availability for use since November of 2020 through the WHO's Emergency Use Listing or EUL program. Let's now look at the deployment of this innovative tool. Can you tell us how many countries have used the vaccine to date and whether all countries are eligible to use the vaccine through the WHO EUL process?
Yeah, sure. So that's the exciting part, really, the fact that going through the development process, as we discussed in the last episode, and essentially having the authorization, through the WHO EUL process. The big task ahead of GPI was to roll the vaccine out and get it to the areas that really need it to stop the paralytic outbreaks. And much like how we discussed the partnership to develop the vaccine, which was truly a global partnership, even for the rollout process also, the entire global polio eradication initiative came together. So Rotary International, WHO, the US CDC, UNICEF, the Gates Foundation, Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, we all formed what we call the NOPV working group. And through that, the rollout was essentially coordinated, working again with other partners like the vaccine manufacturer, biopharma, and others. By now, Feroz, the vaccine has been rolled out in 14 countries. The first use essentially happened in March 2021. And by now, across these 14 countries, approximately 260 million doses of NOPV2 have been administered. So it's quite a massive scale of use under EUL. To your other point, whether or not all the countries can use the vaccine, essentially, since the vaccine is under the EUL authorization, there are a set, criteria, sort of covering some of the preparatory activities around vaccine use, monitoring activities around vaccine use. So as long as countries are ready in a sense, they satisfy those criteria that, as I said, include ability to distribute the vaccine, to monitor how the vaccine is being used and how the performance of the vaccine is going, document cold chain logistics, and so forth. So as long as those criteria are met, a country can use the vaccine. And of course, the other part of it is there has to be an outbreak that the country has to respond to, because NOPV2 is not a vaccine for routine immunization use. Its use is restricted for outbreak response to respond to paralytic outbreaks. So, looking at those criteria and the number of countries that have already documented, the fact that they satisfy those criteria, we have approximately 34 countries that have been, designated as ready to use NOPV2. So it's a nice balance of countries experiencing outbreaks and obviously getting ready to respond to NOPV2 with NOPV2 for those outbreaks. At the same time, countries who may not have outbreaks ongoing but who could be at risk of outbreaks. And so part of the 34 that I just mentioned do not necessarily have outbreaks ongoing, but they have, essentially prepared themselves to use the vaccine should there be an outbreak.
That sounds like a lot of vaccine that's been used already.
Yeah.
And so, given the number of countries that have CVD-PV2 outbreaks and the high demand, do you think there is enough supply?
Yeah, that's another really important issue. So, for 2022, just as an example, the projected supply for NOPV2 from the vaccine manufacturer Biopharma is approximately 600 million doses. And this number is by far much higher than the number of doses we have ever used on an annual basis for a type 2 vaccine. So there is a lot of demand based on the nature of outbreaks in different countries. Also the kind of scope that we are looking at to respond to those outbreaks. At the same time, the other factor playing in is COVID-19, the pandemic. So it has certainly disrupted some of the manufacturing activities and also the shipment of the vaccine from the manufacturer to the countries and then finally to the field where the vaccine is being used. So the growing demand is being also complicated with some of the pandemic related complications that we are dealing with. But having said that, the bottom line is when it comes to type 2 containing oral polio vaccines, and as we have discussed in our last episode, OPVs are very effective in interrupting transmission, any OPV, NOPV or Sabin OPV. So looking into that, we should have sufficient quantity of Sabin OPV2, including monovalent OPV2, trivalent OPV, and NOPV2. So the priority really remains that a country responds as quickly as possible for an outbreak with any available OPV that is there. And focusing just on NOPV2, as I said, the projected supply is 600 million, and we are hopeful it will contribute to most of the demand that we are going to see over the next several months. But obviously, it's a dynamic situation.
Yes, and I can understand how the COVID-19 vaccines have taken priority given the demand from so many countries for multiple doses. But it's good to know there's a lot of NOPV2 supply as well. Can you tell us a little bit about the performance of the NOPV2 vaccine so far?
Sure. So, Feroz, the whole process of NOPV2 deployment is also being matched with an unprecedented amount of monitoring that is happening in the field. An extensive process, again, through the mechanism of GPEI. So, GPEI, working with the regional partners and the country partners, have established mechanisms to collect data on general safety of the vaccine, on genetic stability, and then also around effectiveness. And looking into each of these components, the data so far look very promising. So just as an example, we have been following the adverse events following immunization data, and the overall safety database is being monitored by a group of experts from the Global Advisory Committee on Vaccine Safety. And so far, through successive reviews of the data coming in across different countries, no safety issues of concern or any clusters or red signals really have been detected or identified. So that is really reassuring, particularly given the scale of use of more than 260 million doses administered. When it comes to genetic stability of the vaccine, and again, this is a unique component that we are specifically interested in for NOPV2, again, quite an extensive and detailed plan is in place. So wherever NOPV2 is being used, and through the surveillance network that exists for polio, all the NOPV2 isolates are going through a process of whole genome sequencing and extensive analysis of that data. And again, a group of experts are engaged there. And when we look at that set of data coming in from different countries, again, it's quite reassuring. The fact that the primary area of attenuation, the primary part of the vaccine virus genome, we call it the domain 5, and we are particularly concerned about that area for polio vaccines because typically reversions in those areas are known to be neurovirulent, and cause paralysis. So the amazing thing is when we look into the data across the board for NOPV2, we haven't seen any reversion in that primary attenuation site of the vaccine, which is really reassuring. And then finally, the other piece is effectiveness. And again, in most of the areas where NOPV2 has been used, we haven't seen breakthrough transmissions happening after 2 or more rounds of NOPV2. There are exceptions, like parts of Nigeria are having ongoing transmission, and we are responding again with vaccination campaigns. But in most of the countries, we haven't seen breakthrough transmission, which is an indication that the vaccine is effective. And all of these, Feroz, the general safety data, the genetic stability data, and the effectiveness data coming from the field, their trends are very much consistent with what we saw in the clinical studies, the phase 1 and the phase 2 clinical studies. So overall, it's very reassuring. But obviously, we are still monitoring, and we will keep monitoring through GPEI, working with biopharma, so that we learn as the vaccine is used in such a wide scale, and we'll continue to interpret the data, and that will also inform the policy of using the vaccine.
That sounds very promising. So as a vaccine 2.0, do you see NOPV2 as a silver bullet or some kind of panacea to the world's problems of CVD-PV2s?
Wow, yeah, it's a vaccine 2.0 for polio type 2. It's all too good, right? So first of all, yeah, it is a next generation vaccine, and we are all excited about the overall activities around innovation to develop the vaccine, the accelerated manner in which the development was done in tune with the public health need. So that all of that is exciting. Whether it's a panacea or a silver bullet, I would say no. I think a vaccine, no matter how good it is, no matter how safe and effective it is, if it is sitting in a vaccine vial, it is of no use. So it is really the act and art of vaccination that is what really makes a difference in public health. So my focus will be, on that activity of vaccination, and that's what, is done by the frontline health workers. So, and especially for a program like polio eradication, it's based on house to house, door to door vaccination campaigns driven by the frontline health workers, mostly women vaccinators. So if you ask me what is really going to make the difference, it is that act and art of vaccination that's going to make a difference. The vaccine is an important tool, and NOPV2 is a promising tool, and it's another tool in the range of options that we have for polio eradication, including Sabin OPV, including IPV, and the other diagnostic tools that we have, monitoring tools that we have. So all of that taken together, if applied well in the field, in the underserved areas, in the areas that where it is really, really needed, I think that's what is really gonna make the difference and get us to the finish line. And what is really exciting about an option like NOPV2, it really again serves that essence of eradication to achieve and sustain eradication. And eradication in here is eradication of all forms of polioviruses. So yeah, we are all very excited, and the vaccine holds a lot of promise, but the key will be vaccination.
I could not agree with you more there, Ananda, that it's vaccinations and not just vaccines that help stop outbreaks. So I have one final question for you. Given that we have a vaccine now, a novel vaccine for type 2 poliovirus, what about the other two serotypes, types 1 and types 3 of poliovirus?
Yes, so actually the clinical development of novel oral polio type 1 and novel oral polio vaccine type 3 has already started. So clinical studies are going on with these vaccine candidates, and the overall aim remains the same, to essentially give the program options of vaccines that are more genetically stable. So, given the fact that most of the current circulating vaccine-derived polioviruses are from the type 2 strain of the poliovirus, the prioritization was around NOPV2. But as you note, we also want to ensure we have such tools for the other two types of polio. So yes, NOPV1 and NOPV3 are also in development, and hopefully in the next few years, if the development goes as planned, we will have such vaccines as options as well.
That's excellent. That's fascinating, and we'll continue to follow its use as we go forward. Thank you so much for your time in explaining this to us. And to our viewers, thank you very much for joining us on this part 2 session on NOPV2. If you are interested in continuing your interest in polio eradication, we encourage you to join us for another episode of Coffee with Polio Experts. Until then, take care.